We were recently hit by an ex-tropical cyclone called Ophelia. We're used to storms in Ireland, but this was unusual as only a few days earlier it was a major hurricane and it arrived on a very different approach path. There were warnings that it could possibly be the worst storm to hit Ireland in over 50 years. As I watched it approach, I knew it was time to install that windbreak that I've been meaning to set up for the last couple of months. Here in the Midlands of Ireland, we generally have a few storms a year with winds exceeding 50 kilometers an hour and gusts above 75 kilometers an hour. But with this storm we were expecting gusts above 100 kilometers an hour inland and much higher on the coast, so this was to be taken very seriously. Beyond the threat of general damage, I was particularly concerned about the polytunnel I put up this season in the Black Plot. It was on the same site that a few polytunnels used by the local community farm were destroyed in a storm a few years ago. This site has very little protection from the full force of southwest winds, which are strengthened as they're funneled between a hill to the north and a large building to the south. It is impossible to say how effective a windbreak would have been during that destructive storm a few years ago, or to what extent other factors such as open ends, loose plastic, or larger polytunnels contributed to the loss. What I do know is that it was definitely a risk to put a polytunnel in this location again, and something needed to be done to slow the winds before the first of the winter storms arrived. I have plans for a natural windbreak to provide protection for this entire growing space and to create a sheltered microclimate for the gardens, something we should have planted years ago. I hope to plant part of it this season, but it's going to take a number of years to get established, and until then I'm going to need to rely on an artificial temporary windbreak. But I wasn't sure how much would be enough, or how high it needed to be, or what kind of structure would be strong enough to support it, because I've never built one before. But under time pressure, the length and design was dictated by the materials available and a judgment call about how much would be enough. Part of this decision was how much I was willing to spend to protect the tunnel and how much time I had to put it all up. It seemed the best option was heavy-duty windbreak material that was 2 meters tall and 25 meters long. This was enough to create an L-shaped screen protecting the polytunnel from the south and west winds, which is the general direction of about 80% of the strong winds we experience. It would be horrible if the polytunnel was damaged by flying debris from a failed structure that was installed to protect it, so the structure needed to be strong, or it would be better to not put it up at all. I ended up installing posts supported by lots of guy ropes, with the windbreak material securely clamped to the posts and clipped to a top rope. The forecast on the morning the storm arrived indicated it would start in the early afternoon with strong southeast winds. This was a real concern as the tunnel wasn't protected from this direction. These were supposed to be followed by stronger blasts from the south and the southwest later in the day. Parts of Ireland were hit really hard, but it didn't end up being so bad where we are, although it was still violent enough. In the end, it was the strong southeast gusts of about 105 kilometers an hour that did the most damage locally and blew down a lot of trees in the area. These were the strongest winds we've had from this direction, and the fourth strongest winds we've experienced for at least 10 years. In comparison, the storm that destroyed the polytunnels on this site 4 years ago had sustained winds from the west of 85 kilometers an hour and gusts of up to 120 kilometers an hour. These strong southeast gusts from Ophelia arrived earlier than expected, but the winds from the west that arrived later in the day were not so strong. I think without the windbreak my new polytunnel could still have been threatened, but in the end of the day it was still standing and the plastic was thankfully undamaged. I wish that was the extent of the story, with awareness, preparation, and new infrastructure saving the day, but it was a bit more dramatic than that, mainly due to negligence on my part. While the plastic of some polytunnels is fixed to a base rail, the plastic in this polytunnel was buried in a trench. When I installed it during a busy period in the early summer, I didn't get around to putting enough soil back in the trench to fully weigh it down, and hadn't gotten around to finish the job. Completing this task was on my list of things to do before the storm arrived, but I prioritized putting up the windbreak and was only able to finish part of the job. On the morning the storm arrived, I was hoping to finish filling the rest of the trenches, including the long east-facing side, but I ran out of time. Early in the storm, the strongest gusts from the southeast started to pull up the plastic from under the soil along the unprotected east side. There just wasn't enough weight to keep it secure, and possibly the water was helping to lubricate things. It was likely the same gusts that blew down the tree just northwest of the polytunnel that started things moving. When plastic starts to come loose, it becomes much easier for the wind to jerk the rest of it out of the ground and then to destroy it by whipping it about. I was passing by when I saw this starting to happen, and I knew I was about to lose the plastic. It was either stand back and marvel as the violence of the wind took control, or to start shoveling soil to weigh down the plastic as much as I could. Fortunately, the bed alongside the tunnel was empty, and I was able to quickly shovel a lot of soil onto the buried edge of the plastic. I built up quite a pile of soil and occasionally walked along the edge of it to push it down, which was enough to prevent the plastic from slipping anymore. An added bonus was that I had left a space between the edge of the trench and the post structure of the polytunnel frame. There was just enough space for the weight of all the soil to pull the plastic down and tighten the entire sheet over the frame again. A neighbor came along to help make sure the plastic all around the base was weighed down enough, and it remained tight for the rest of the storm. I was really lucky to notice the plastic coming loose when I did. If I had passed by a little earlier, the plastic might still have been tight, and I may have gone home, and a little later would probably have been too late. Negligence on my part was counteracted by luck, good timing, and some quick hard work, and the job I'd been procrastinating doing was finally done. The polytunnel is now much better prepared for the next storm, which is already on its way, but I need to continue to develop the site to extend the artificial windbreak and eventually replace it with a natural one. Overall, it was a very useful experience. I now know how to put up a secure windbreak, and I'm less likely to hesitate in putting up another one because I've felt how much calmer the wind is behind that fabric. I now know what it's like to work in 100-kilometer-an-hour winds, and that a lot of work can be done in a short period of time given the right incentive. It was also a valuable opportunity to learn that I really should be doing the job properly the first time. I seem to be searching for different and exciting ways to learn this lesson over and over again. We are currently in the middle of the second storm of the season, and it is a real relief to know that everything is much more secure. It also feels really good to get such positive feedback on my YouTube channel, and to know that people around the world are willing to support me so that the creation of these videos and all the explorations that I'm doing in the gardens could become financially viable enough for me to be able to continue. If you would like to support me, please follow this link to my Patreon page or in the description below. Thanks to those of you who have already made pledges, and thanks to everyone for watching.